welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And with me, as always, is my partner in crime, our Chief of Research, Derek Cohen. Derek, how are we doing? We're getting ready for summer.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone here is complaining about that, just the humidity and the temperature. But other than that, no, I'm sure everyone's ready for summer.
Everything's fine. Yeah, actually, it hasn't been too bad. It hasn't been too bad in Texas. It's been said a couple of weekends in a row. It's been pretty nice. But of course, as I say that,
you said it as there was 100% humidity this morning. So
I probably just jinxed us. Well, of course, the biggest news in the world right now, as we're sitting here 30 minutes later, is that Trump has officially endorsed in the Senate race, and we won't get into all that. But the focus in the last few weeks, or at least from the primary into the runoff, has all been about turnout. After the primary, the Democrats were celebrating because they thought, it's the largest turnout in a primary that they've ever had in the last 25 years. But now that Trump has gotten in the race, and we'll see what happens with the runoff. What do you think about GOP turnout? Do you think this excites people, and we're going to see, millions of more people coming to the polls in November?
Yeah, that I don't know. And in fact, I actually think that today's endorsement, when it comes in terms of aggregate turnout, I think might actually have a bit of an opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at during the primary itself, why turnout was higher, is that both the Democrats and the Republicans had, complete up and down ballot contested races, ones that really were marquee races, even on the Democrat side. And I think on the Democrat side, a lot of that was largely adjudicated in March. Mm-hmm. And so from there, you come over to, here we are in, it is May, right?
Yeah.
It's all starting to blend together. You come over here to May, and a lot of those races are already settled. On the Republican side, though, you still did have a lot of active races going on, mm-hmm. but with such a high-profile endorsement going in, that might dampen enthusiasm, to be honest with you, on both sides. So I think that November turnout is going to be a complete de novo. That's going to be completely unique. But I think that the overall turnout we're going to see in the primary runoff is going to be lower than you would expect had an endorsement not being made. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. I think this is, ever since, 2014 or for the Cruz re-election in 18 probably was the last time that we had at the very top of the ticket a super competitive race. And so I think that's one thing that regardless of who wins the runoff, everybody's going to be looking at Texas. And I'm sure the media just can't, is absolutely ecstatic because all this money's going to come into Texas. They'll look at it and they'll get it wrong per usual.
Yeah, all the predictions will be wrong. All right. Well, one thing I can't predict is one of my favorite products that we have here at TPPF is our newsletters, our weekly newsletter called The Post. This is my favorite part of the show, which is to shamelessly plug all of our products, which you can subscribe to. It's a weekly newsletter. It's called The Post. You can subscribe to it at texaspolicy.com/The Post. Always has some exclusive material in there. It's kind of a comprehensive look at what we're working on at TPPF and commenting on. There's always some kind of fun Texas thing at the end of the newsletter. So hopefully you are already subscribed to that. So share that with your family and friends. If you're not, you can go to texaspolicy.com/The Post to subscribe. Okay, we are very excited to introduce our next guest. We've been working very hard to get her on the show, and we finally have done that. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne is here with us. She represents the Texas's 24th Congressional District in the House of Representatives, serving as one of the fastest growing and most economically dynamic regions in the country. Before coming to Congress, she served as the mayor of Irving and later as regional administrator for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. In Washington, she has become a leading voice on border security, very important, obviously, in Texas, economic growth, energy policy, and small business issues. And interestingly, and I can't wait to talk to her about this, she's also helped launch the Congressional Creators Caucus, which, as podcasters that we are, we're creators now, focused on the growing digital and creator economy. Congresswoman Van Duyne, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here. I mean, I wish I was in Austin, as opposed to being in D.C., but it's very cool to join you guys today.
Well,
I'm sorry it took so long. I didn't realize it was so hard to get us connected.
It was. We were just very excited about the opportunity, and so we've been working on it for a while. And so we're not gonna belabor any more time. We'd love to chat with you about a number of different issues. I want to get to kind of the headline of the week here in Texas. I guess outside of the Senate race now, but the big headline at the beginning of the week was that a federal judge blocked a very important piece of legislation here in Texas called SB 4, a law that would have allowed Texas law enforcement to detain and deport illegal immigrants. clearance. And this is something that we've polled numerous times. A large majority of Texans believe that local communities, if they are willing and if they have the resources to, they should be allowed, once they detain illegals, to be able to detain them and then deport them immediately. Congressman Jody Arrington, of course, of Texas, has a resolution affirming states' rights to defend themselves against a border invasion, which is something that you've been very supportive of, and is a resolution that you've signed on as well. I just want to get your overall take on this fight that we seem to be having, whether it's with the Biden administration or even trying to get it right within the Trump administration. This tension that exists between, a federal responsibility that is immigration enforcement and border security with the rights of the states to be able to be able to defend their communities. Where do you come down on that approach?
Well, I'm absolutely, as you can tell by signing on to Chairman Arrington's piece of policy, that I'm absolutely in favor of states being able to, when the federal government doesn't, step in and defend themselves. What we saw during the Biden administration was nothing short of dangerous, crazy, and potentially illegal. You had a federal government who accepts, tax dollars, and part of that is supposed to be to enforce the laws. And the Biden administration was picking and choosing whatever they thought was politically expedient and would help them stay in power, what laws that they were going to enforce. And as a result, the state of Texas had to come in and spend $11 billion of state income, of state taxes, to be able to try to protect its borders along with the U.S. border. And what we saw was the Biden administration was coming in and handpicking. I mean, they were even taking out precaution measures that the state was putting in. If you look at their the razor wire that they were putting down, the buoys that they were putting down the river, and you had our own federal government working against us. So I think we've got a constitution that allows for states to be able to have sovereignty and to be able to protect themselves. We need to follow the law, and whether or not that is putting a fine point on it and making sure that we're emphasizing that with a separate bill. But when I was a mayor of Irving, Texas, right, it's one of the top 100 largest cities in the country, we had an issue with immigration, and we worked with the federal government on a program that they called 287G. And it recognized that you could have local law enforcement that could work with the federal government to enforce those laws. But what the 287G program does is it puts basically all of the power in the federal government by not allowing those without it being deemed so by the federal government to be able to work on enforcement. And what do you do when the federal government says we're just not going to follow the law? We're just not going to enforce the law. And in fact, we're going to prevent local and state law enforcement officers from doing that in their states. So it's a ridiculous law that we even have to pass. It's common sense that we should be able to do it. There's no reason why the Biden administration didn't enforce the laws, did not protect our borders, but Texas stepped up. And as a result, I think we have to get this codified into law.
Well, ma'am, I think that under the Trump administration, that there's we had that saying that I believe Jerome brought up, that the reward to who wins the pie eating contest is more pie.
Right.
Similar, we also have the phenomenon where I think you also can work yourself out of a job or take focus off an issue. And I think they were kind of seeing that here, because I think some of the polling that you've done, Brian, on border issues is that you see it kind of, reflective of Trump's success in this area, kind of going down, trending downward, at least in terms of the valence for the voters. So, ma'am, I'd like to know, when you're back in your district, what are you hearing still on immigration and border security? Has that changed fundamentally since 18 months ago?
I think people saw, the tens of millions of people who are allowed in this country illegally. They definitely felt it in the economy. When you've got that many people who enter your country, and all of a sudden you're having taxpayer bills having to be spent on housing them, on clothing them, on feeding them, on providing health care and education, you definitely felt that. Not to mention, the increase in sex trafficking and child trafficking and in crime, violent crime, drug cartel crime, fentanyl deaths. We all felt that. So I think most people in our district, most people in Texas are very thankful that the Trump administration came in and secured our border. I think where we have heard is the fact that nearly 3 million people have self-deported or has been deported, in the last year and 4 months. And roughly 25% of those, 1 out of 4, have been in Texas. So I think Texans have really experienced, or know someone who this has happened to, and so they're experiencing more than most other constituents in other states. And as a result, I think some of it is they're feeling it personally, and if you know somebody that this has happened to, you may be more sympathetic. Some of the rhetoric that has been coming out of the administration hit ears wrong. But I will tell you, Tom Homan is a personal friend of mine. I really look up to him and what he has been able to achieve and why he does it. And when I was down with Tom Homan and at the border my freshman year, and I saw the painstaking work that Border Patrol agents were having to do, babysitting kids, they had no idea where their families were, having thousands of people staying in these tents that were built during the Obama administration, not having enough space. This is during COVID. And there's no wonder you saw the stress, the number of people committing suicide, and the number of people who were quitting during those years. And this is a man with Tom Homan who really legitimately wants to do the right thing, has been doing it for decades, and has a tremendous amount of experience and respect in the community. And I think sometimes the rhetoric gets in the face of the actual benefits and the work that we're doing. And I wish that wouldn't be the case. But at the end of the day, when I talk to people in my district, they are very grateful that we have a secure border. They are very grateful that they have seen, mortgage rates go down and apartment rates go down because we're no longer paying, top penny of their hard-earned taxpayer dollars to fund, the stay of people who should not be here illegally. When you talk to people in our district, parents, like Ava Moore's parents, who had an illegal immigrant who should never have been in this country run over their daughter who was out just swimming in Lake Grapevine, and as a result died because we had somebody who should never been in our country. When you talk to those people, what's happening with our immigration is greatly benefited, and they're very happy and grateful to this president and his administration for doing that.
So how do we make sure that, whether it's Congress or the state of Texas, doesn't take its foot off the gas? I mean, we have a president who's willing to sign, bills. I mean, he's obviously willing to do a lot of on the executive side. The problem with doing stuff on the executive side is that, God forbid we have another Joe Biden at some point. He can just reverse all of that, or AOC or something worse. How does Congress, how does Congress make sure that they don't take their foot off the gas? And, what's next for Congress in terms of what are you all working on? But then also at the state level, are there things that we can be doing here to signal, support for what you're doing up there? Things like SB4 or other state legislation that says, hey, yeah, give us the ball. We're willing to take it. How do we work together to make sure that, again, we're not taking our foot off the gas and we're encoding and making permanent these gains?
Well, I think trying to codify that in law is important. I mean, some of the stuff he figures is already codified in law, and you had an administration that completely just ignored the law. So passing more bills, you can ask yourself, will that really make a difference? We're trying. There are literally hundreds of bills right now that are waiting to get a home on the floor. As many that have been passed, I have passed some that took on our regulation fights, recognizing the fact that under the Biden administration, you saw $1.8 trillion more of regulation come down. We're trying to codify these. A lot of these we've been able to get out of the House, and they've died in the Senate. So making sure that we've got, members on the floor of the Senate, recognizing the fact that they need 60 votes, and we only have 53 of them over there right now. That we have got to make sure that they recognize how important this is. But unfortunately, you see so many of the Democrat senators not wanting to give, President Trump any credit whatsoever. Now, Texas is an amazing state. And actually, there's a lot of the state bills that if they are federally, if it makes sense to have them out of the federal government, not just at the state government, that we could learn from and that we have learned from. There's a reason why you are seeing the manufacturing resurgence in Texas, why you are seeing that being the number one producer of energy, why we are seeing so many companies, specifically in the manufacturing and the financial sector, that are moving from places like Illinois and New York and California to Texas. Because we are focused on decreasing regulations. We don't have a state income tax, recognizing that people want to actually make and earn and keep, what they work so hard to do. And so we're learning that, in Texas, they're actually, walking the walk. We can learn a lot from the federal government. And I'm trying to codify as many of those practices into law as possible. But you need to have 60 votes in the Senate. And it's where things go to die, unfortunately.
Now, ma'am, you recently led a request for investigation into alleged H1B fraud in North Texas. For those folks who don't follow this closely at home, what problems are you seeing in the current system, and why do we feel that we need to have federal investigators look into it?
Well, I started getting some complaints from folks. I watched Sarah Gonzalez from The Blaze, who's just an amazing work highlighting, some of the issues. She's seen, single family homes that claim to be employing, hundreds of HB1 visa holders that are obviously not corporations, obviously not businesses. She's gone to basically empty warehouses, again, that have claimed to be hiring these people that are not, legitimate businesses. And when we start uncovering the fraud and you start looking at where are those areas around the country that are heavy with H1B visa and potentially H1B visa fraud, and it's actually in North Texas, which is why that we have led, I led a letter along with Congressman Brandon Gill, Pat Fallon, and Ronnie Jackson, all from North Texas, urging this administration to do a couple of things. One, investigate the fraud. Have it investigated by a number of different relevant agencies. Two, share data. Make sure that one agency knows what is happening in another agency. Three, strengthen enforcement. A lot of these things are just kind of rubber stamped, and we need to make sure that's not happening. And four, give us ideas on legislation that can close these loopholes, because we are taking away jobs that Americans need, that Americans are qualified for. When this program was originally created, it was to get like the best of the best of the best talent that we don't have in the U.S. to fill very few unique positions. And it has absolutely exploded. You are getting folks here that are using this as a way to get immigration in. It has nothing to do with employment. It has nothing to do with strengthening our American businesses, but just the opposite. We are shutting out American workers. Folks who are graduating from college can't get these entry-level positions because they are now reserved for H-1B visa holders, because there is an entire, mom and pop industry that's turning into a multi-billion-dollar industry who is taking advantage of these loopholes that we've got in our laws. So we are trying to do what we can to shut that down and to make sure that those jobs are going to American workers.
I want to shift now to we could sit here and talk about immigration all day. It's so important to Texas. But while we have you, another issue that's right up there is, of course, economic development. Texas is such a generator of jobs and economic opportunity. We've just got corporations tripping over themselves to get to Austin as fast as they can for a number of the reasons that you illuminated. One of those, no pun intended, is energy and how important energy is to Texas. You're, of course, a member of the House Energy Action Team. What do you all do? I mean, that puts you right in the middle of the policy for the next generation. When it comes to things like making sure we have affordable, reliable energy, what are you all thinking about, and what are you all looking at trying to fix and reform? And then, of course, here in Texas, we have this whole debate over data centers and the future of AI and how that all connects to energy. So, do a lot of those issues, do you have to deal with a lot of those issues up there? And how are you approaching that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we deal with these issues every day. We're from Texas, so we've got a very strong Texas delegation that gets it. And again, we're not only the number one producer of energy in the country, we're the number one consumer of energy in the country.
Oh, wow.
And I think you're going to see that happen, as you get more and more data centers. But, part of this one big, beautiful bill that I worked on for over 2.5 years was making sure that we could actually have American production of energy. Amen. Too often than not, under our Democrat colleagues and under the last Democrat administration, you saw that industry demonized. They did everything that they could to make it more expensive, to make it harder to get permits, to make it harder to actually explore, and did everything we could to tie the hands of our American energy producers behind their back, making us completely not able to compete with the rest of the world. Now, when you look at how our energy is produced, it's cleaner than any other country. So unleashing American freedom fuel would make sense. unless you're, one of these kind of crazy folks that are basically getting paid by China, you know, to hurt our American energy industry. But part of that one big beautiful bill was going after the regulations and unleashing American energy producers. I think that is a very important part of what we're doing. I don't know if you were familiar with former Congressman Bill Flores, who's now, helping run ERCOT, but ERCOT is also very much engaged in these data centers and making sure that we've got energy for tomorrow. These data centers are going to be very important. And I know, look, as a local mayor, as a local, former council member, I understand the demands and the complaints at the local level. What we have heard is complaints about, energy. And again, Bill Flores and the ERCOT folks are getting applications for people who are looking at these data centers, and they want to make sure that they are, doing exactly what President Trump said, which is bring your own energy, so that they are not only, paying for the infrastructure of additional energy sources, but they're actually putting more energy on the grid than they're taking off, which at the end of the day should help to lower energy prices. We're looking at issues, that have to do with water consumption. And a lot of these systems now and in the future are going to be closed. So that's going to limit the amount of water that they use. And they're also looking at other technologies to be able to cool and other things than water. And I think that will definitely be able to help. But there's no doubt in my mind. We are a leading state in manufacturing, in chip manufacturing, in imports, in exports, in energy. And we need to make sure that we are staying on top of the technology war with China. So we're going to have an opportunity to be able to have these data centers. But we also need to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible manner. And again, having the application process that ERCOT is producing and the demands that they're saying, you can't just take all the energy off the grid. You got to put more on than you take out to make sure that we're not having the increases and spikes in energy costs. And they got to pay for the infrastructure. Those are all well and good, and this is the reason why Texas, I believe, is leading the way amongst any other nation, any other city in the country. We've got the 8th largest economy, and there's a reason for that. Smart policy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with you 100%, man. If anyone's going to figure out, it's going to be Texans, right?
So, absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to ask, and Brian teased this a little bit at the beginning, is one of the more unique things you're working on is that Congressional Creators Caucus. Yeah. So, real quick about that is what need is this satisfying? What do you kind of see the outgrowth? What would success look like for the Creators Caucus?
We work on a lot of things that I think most people are very familiar with, whether or not it's working on affordability issues, tax issues, to let people, to make people be able to not have to pay as much in taxes, to keep more of what they spend and more of what they earn. Working on regulations, working on trade policy. This was a little bit of a unique animal for me. And I didn't realize how much it actually affected our economy. And just to name off a little bit of stats here. So in 2024, the global creator economy is currently worth $200 billion. And it's expected to hit $500 billion by 2030. Wow. Over 35% of the global creator economy is from North America. There are 70 million content creators that are earning income. 70 million. And you got another 200 million that are actually creating content that all of us are receiving. The IAB reports that internet-dependent jobs are about 1.5 million full-time employment opportunities, and job creators have created jobs in our country. That's grown by about 7.5 times since 2000. So 60% of these full-time creators say that business operations are the hardest part of their job, whether or not that's dealing with taxes, some of the legal stats that they're not quite sure of, pricing. And so it seemed to me that we in Congress have an ability to either crush an industry as it's growing or hopefully help it propel. But in order to get Congress out of the way, we needed people engaged that are actually doing these jobs and are actually helping to create content. So we worked with YouTube to actually find some of these folks and created the Content Creator Caucus, recognizing that this is a burgeoning industry. They're employing millions of people, and this is a future that we can either crush or help promote. And I want to help promote it, but it's by listening to the people that are actually like you, creating the content and letting us know. And part of the future of that is not just the taxes that they're dealing with now, not just kind of the pricing structures, but it's also being sure to look forward to the future. And we have had complaints dealing even with like AI and how people's contents are being manipulated in putting forward. People are making money on the ideas that other people have put forward that are now being manipulated with AI and somebody else has taken their ideas and running with them. And we've got to make sure that we've got laws that prevent that from happening.
I think, Brian, it started pointing out that obviously that perspective contrasted with, say, California's perspective, where they're almost explicitly trying to crush the gig economy, I think stands in pretty stark relief.
I mean, the number of things that stand in stark contrast to how Texas approaches something to how California approaches something. I mean, that would fill an entire other podcast.
I would say we should talk to Chuck about this. I don't know if he's ever written about
it. for sure. Well, I love what you're doing there with that. I'm just curious because most people maybe over the age of 40 or so, they hear influencer and they kind of roll their eyes, or they think it's Kim Kardashian or somebody that's like one of these crazy. But it's not, as you said, it's 70 million people are earning income off this. Another 200 million or so are creating content. I mean, that's just amazing. So what's like when you talk to somebody who kind of rolls their eyes and says, "Oh, what is this all about? Why are we focusing? Is this a serious thing you're focusing on?" Other than the economic side of it, like what value do you think they bring, and how would you tell somebody this is an important thing to do?
Well, are they legit or not? I'll tell you, I kind of had my eyes open when I got invited at the last minute to an opening, a company that was opening in Frisco called Dude Perfect. And I will be honest with you. Okay, I'm in my mid-50s. I was not familiar with Dude Perfect, but my 24-year-old son was like, "You get to go where? What?" He knew everything about them. And they had like over 60 million viewers. You think about the impact of that, and how many people that they're hiring. And I went up to their opening, and you see their facility. This is a legit, real business. These are full-time jobs that they're creating. These are investment dollars that they're putting into those communities. And it's a profit center. I mean, it's incredible how many people they influence and how many people's lives that they're affecting. And this is a growing business. So, for people who might just say, "Oh, it's a Kim Kardashian," I'd ask how many jobs are being created by this? How many people are being able to raise money, being able to work from home? And then think about the content. When you ask anywhere between the ages of 15 and 35 now, where most people are getting their information, they're not saying the New York Times. They're not even watching, Fox News anymore. A majority of the information from folks who are much younger than I am is gotten on the screens. And I think these are good jobs. These are influential jobs, and it's not just people teaching you how to tie a bow or to apply mascara.
Yeah.
Hey, don't you criticize the cooking tips. I've learned a lot there.
No, that's great. Just to prove that we're on the cusp of innovation as well. For the first time at our Texas Policy Summit, which is the largest conservative gathering outside of D.C. in the nation, we had what we called our influencer experience, where we invited over a dozen influencers to come and just cover our event and create content and kind of see what they were interested in, and they got to ask questions, and they took a bunch of video and all of that. So we're in that world. We're trying to promote it as much as possible. So we've already had. Yeah, we've had a bunch of meetings about how to do it better next year and make sure that we get more out of it, because you're absolutely right. I mean, 60 million views on a video. I mean, it's just, that's more than primetime television, on network television right now. I mean, it's probably 2 or 3 times maybe in some cases as it is. So, if you ignore it, you do so at your own peril. So,
absolutely. We want to engage. We want to engage and make sure that we are not putting, any kind of barriers to entry in the market, and that we're encouraging that industry to flourish. These are opportunities to make a difference across the world, specifically, in North America. But these are shows. This is content that reaches all the way around the globe. And so we need to make sure that we are protecting folks' ability to be able to make money, to be able to create content, but we don't know what we don't know. And it's, just like you said, some people smile and some people don't get it. I'm working with a lot of folks. I'm old, but I'm working with some folks who are even older than I am up here who don't spend time online playing around and may not have young kids that are kind of connecting them to what is influential today. So opening that pathway up and saying, hey, we want to have more input from people who are out there in the industry. Where the rubber's meeting the road. What are the problems that you're having? And, is it tax? Is it people coming in and stealing your identity and taking over your content? Is it pricing? Is it, is it like a digital tax that they were charging in Canada? Where we actually have to have, our trade ambassador get involved. I mean, these are legitimate, federal issues that, quite honestly, we should be more engaged with. But we also have to make sure that we're educated in it. I've seen way too much legislation passed, from people who don't know what they're doing.
Well, we are super supportive of it, and we will keep an eye on all that. And, of course, if we can do anything to help back here in Texas, please let us know. Congresswoman Van Duyne, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very busy woman. You've got to get on to your next meeting, so we will unfortunately have to leave it there for right now. But thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you guys next time I'm down in Austin. If you're ever up in D.C. or anybody of your listeners are up in D.C., contact our office and let's just make sure it's a great experience for you.
We would love to have you in studio. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for me and Derek. Thank you all for your support for our creation that we do here at TPPF. So thank you very much for that. And as we always like to say at the end of the show, in the immortal words of our favorite founding Texas father, is he favorite? Sam Houston's our favorite? One of the favorites?
You ask a dozen people, you'll get 13 answers.
He famously said, do good and suffer the consequences. So we will leave it there, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for being here.